Good day. It's all gotta start somewhere. Epic franchises just don't appear overnight. The Dark Forces series of first-person shooters are some of the best ever devised. And well, for the longest time, playing the first game was not an easy prospect. But thanks to the boys at Night Dive, we finally have a proper remaster of the unsung classic that is Star Wars Dark Forces.
Today, we are looking at the Night Dive remaster of Star Wars Dark Forces. This remaster was released on February 28th of 2024 and has ensured that a whole new audience of gamers has a chance to play this awesome game, and it is available on PC and all modern consoles. And what it does is it gives the game a modern screen resolution, modern controls, and high-resolution sprites for the enemies and the weapons. We got redone cutscenes with higher resolution as well, and it also includes behind-the-scenes concept art. It even has a level that was cut from the game, and originally this level was supposed to be the first level. As we shall find out, the devs were pretty wise in cutting it. For console players, this is the only way to play the game, so of course I recommend it. For PC players, if you want to save some dosh, just get the original game and play it with the Jedi Engine source port, as it will give you largely the same experience for cheap. Star Wars Dark Forces was originally developed and published by LucasArts and released on March 8th, 1995. Almost 30 years ago! Today, I still have my original disc from those days, and it was the very first Star Wars game that I ever played. It is a first-person shooter where you fill the awesome boots of one of the greatest Star Wars/video game protagonists of all time, Kyle Space Chuck Norris Katarn. This game is often derisively called a mere Doom clone due to the first-person nature of the combat, but this game far exceeds Doom in terms of combat and gameplay complexity. In the game, you have a good number of weapons. The Briar pistol, a powerful and accurate pistol that is often forgotten about 5 seconds into the game. And then you got the E11 blaster rifle, a weapon used from start to bloody finish. This rifle has a huge ammo pool and will slaughter just about anything in the game except for bosses. This can make the game kind of boring, as you will just be using the same gun all the time, but it makes sense as this is a repeating blaster of decent power. And primarily you're just fighting Stormies in this game, so you don't really need much else. Then you got the thermal jets. Doom, and by extension other first-person shooters, would not have throwable weapons for some time, and so Dark Forces pioneered the very concept of grenades in gaming, and as such, they're kinda rough. Getting the throw angle is really difficult, and most of the time you won't use the bloody things. Then you have the Welder, a 4-barreled blaster that is mostly forgotten about but can be used on some bosses if you remember you have it. The repeating blaster shows up for the first time, and it will appear in different forms for the rest of the series. It's equivalent to the minigun in Doom, and is a weapon I never found myself using too much since it blows through ammo and is not appreciably better than the E11. The trip mines are another weapon that was ahead of its time, but due to this, it's just too finicky to use most of the time. The conch rifle makes its first appearance and will appear throughout the Dark Forces series. In this game, it can hit multiple enemies at once, and while cool in theory, it can hurt you if you're not careful, so it's not often used due to this. You then have the mortar launcher, and it's this game's rocket launcher equivalent, and it's great for the weaker bosses and crowds of enemies. Lastly, you have the phase plasma rifle, and this thing is great for bosses. Another thing that differentiates this game from Doom is secondary fire. Not every weapon will have secondary fire, but most will. And for the plasma rifle, its secondary fire is a rocket launcher, and it's very good for finishing off some of the tougher enemies. In addition to the pretty good weapons, we have items that you can carry all the time. A flashlight to light up dark areas, IR goggles, and a breathing mask. Yeah, Doom had some items, but they were single-use things and were not often seen throughout that game. Health is handled differently from Doom as well. In this game, Kyle has a personal shield generator that lets him tank a bunch of shots, but when it gets low and finally goes out entirely, you take health damage, and this can end your trip real quick. Another major departure from Doom is the nature of the levels. Each level has to be completed in one sitting. Oddly enough, in the 90s, this would become a Star Wars staple for whatever reason. There are intro-level checkpoints, but you cannot just save whenever you want, and the game uses the bloody live system. Annoying, yes, but I will admit that it makes each level a nail-biting affair, especially when you've been beat to crap by a bloody dubstep trooper and you're on your last life and you really don't want to have to run the gauntlet again. The levels are not so long and hard as to get annoying, so where starting a level is not going to be a deal breaker for most gamers. I'm about as impatient as they come, and even I will accept a loss and try again. The levels for Dark Forces are really bloody impressive, and in 95 were beyond what was thought possible. Remember, in 95 most games were shoot bastard, get key, find exit. Dark Forces embraced modernity and rejected tradition and tried for something new. In each level you have objectives. Yeah, they're kind of simple by today's standards, but they're there. The levels themselves are more advanced than anything Doom had to offer, and this mostly works. It's quite amazing how well these 90s first-person shooters have aged, but since Dark Forces was bleeding edge, this means there are a few major issues in this game. The big one is there are some major league maze levels after the first two levels. The first two levels in the game are pretty straightforward and are the most Doom-like in terms of design. These levels will lull you into a false sense of security, since in reality this is not strictly a first-person shooter, but instead a first-person environment shooter. And this means that navigating the levels is the main challenge, and blasting bastards is kind of secondary. It's a bit of a bait and switch. Thanks, D&D nerds. But they're fun enough, and if you love navigational challenges, this game's for you. Until you get to level 6. Even if you love maze-like levels, level 6, the detention center, this is gonna make you want to throw the game out the window. You are in for hell. For many, this is where the game will end, and I can guarantee you this is where I cheated back in the 90s. I get it. It was 95, and the devs wanted the players to use their brains and wanted to give them a real challenge. I respect that. But what I do not respect is bullshit. And this level is without a doubt utter bullshit, and is the worst level in the entire Dark Forces series of games. That's gotta be hyperbole, right? Oh, my sweet Padawan, you might find yourself falling to the dark side when I tell you why this level is utter bullshit. So in this level, you've got to infiltrate this Imperial prison to rescue original trilogy character Crix Madine. Now, those who are a big fan of Star Wars will remember that awesome Rogue Squadron level. But everything's got to start somewhere, and this is the first time we get to find out how Crix Madine made his way to the Rebel Alliance. And I'm so glad this got retconned in Rogue Squadron. Anyway, you run all around this bloody detention block and make it to this area where you gotta go through a reactor for some reason to get a key. Yeah, you thought that exhaust port was bad? So in order to get through this reactor to the key, you need a breath mask. The game does not tell you this, nor does it hint that you might need one. Earlier in the level, you have to time going through a force field, and you might be given to assume that you do that here because there is a force field and it blinks on and off, so you might think, well, okay, just time it again. Nope. You will just die if you try this. You need a breath mask. Where is it? Why, it's behind this bit of featureless wall, of course. This is bullshit. This is not a challenge. This is an oversight. The only way anyone could have figured this out is if they went up to every wall in this entire bloody level and clicked on it. For hours. There is no excuse for this, and I know this ruined the game for many gamers, as there is no realistic way to know that that is there, and if you don't get that bloody mask, you are done. It's due to this bullshit that this game cannot really be called a masterpiece, as no one can realistically be expected to beat this on their own unless they spend hours clicking on every goddamn wall. What's worse is the fact that no other level in the game does this, and every other level doesn't waste your time like this one. Yeah, there are some hard bits, but no other level keeps a bloody plot important item hidden behind a normal bloody looking wall with no goddamn hints. This one design idea almost single-handedly ruins this bloody game and is likely the reason for this game's spotty reputation amongst gamers. The rest of the levels will have environment puzzles, but they are understandable enough. One level has a really bloody dull door puzzle, but at least you can see the goddamn doors, and that level is capped off with a battle against Boba Fett. If not for level 6, Dark Forces would likely have come to be seen as a gaming masterwork and the next leap forward in first-person shooters. As it is, it's still kinda that, but will always be held back by that one idiotic design decision. In 1995, story in first-person shooters was often just relegated to text screens and instruction manuals, but here we got full-on cutscenes and a really kick-ass story that should have and could have been made into a movie. Despite these kick-ass cutscenes, story is primarily told through text-based pre-mission briefings. This is also the only place where we get to see Jan Ors, and we never see Jan and Kyle directly interact in the game via cutscene. This game introduces gaming legend Kyle Katarn. This time around he has no beard and has been eating whole nerfs and spending 20 hours in the gym because he is bloody ripped in this game. He has no force powers yet, so he has to rely upon his brains and his blaster. This game introduces him, his ship the Moldy Crow, and his sexy partner in crime, Jan Ors. And it's thanks to this kick-ass story that Dark Forces is still well remembered despite that goddamn level 6. If you were not even bloody born yet when this game came out, or if you skipped it back in the day, pick it up and give it a playthrough. Graphically, this is a really good looking game, but a bit too good looking. It's kind of a paradox. The more abstract graphics of Doom have held up well, but the Dark Forces graphics look crappier due to being sprites of things that actually exist, and thus they have that uncanny valley look to them. The levels and level textures are really well realized, and they have aged remarkably well. The animations, such as they are pretty okay, but in the cutscenes, you will not be seeing any dynamic movement. Still, the graphics are not pixel vomit, and it's easy enough to overlook their more aged aesthetic. Sound? It's kick-ass. All the blasters sound right, as do all the normal sound effects, and then we got the VA work. VA work in early 90s games was always spotty at best, but everyone does a great job, and the Darth Vader sound-alike is very close to James Earl Jones. Kyle himself would be voiced by a number of different actors over the years, but he sounds great here and does not phone in his performance. Music is the standard Star Wars score. It is pretty great, but can get old after a while, and that's the problem. With a famous score like this, odds are you will have already heard it a million times, and thus when you get stuck on a level for 3 bloody hours, even the amazing indoor track gets really old. Star Wars Dark Forces concerns the adventures of one Kyle Kick-Ass Katarn and his mission officer Jan the Cuteness Ors. They fight the fell forces of the Dubstep Devils, the Dark Troopers. Kyle Katarn would get major expansion after this game was released in the novel and audio drama Soldier of the Empire. Kyle Katarn was born to one Morgan Katarn on the planet of Sulan. He would become a stormtrooper, but on his first mission, he would refuse to blast a civilian, and thus he would become, shall we say, estranged from the Imperial war machine, and would become a merc that would sometimes do missions for the rebels. The civilian he saved was a woman named Jan Ors, a rebel, and she would be assigned to Kyle, and on their first mission together, she would be told by Mon Mothma to shoot Kyle if it looked like he would turn traitor. The first mission in the game has you getting one half of the Death Star plans. Screw you, Disney! The other half would be secured by a group called the Kestrel, a group of all-female commandos. Their homeworld would be reduced to medieval technology by the Empire until the end of the Galactic Civil War. This first mission is excellent. It showed how far first-person shooters had come, and it's short, it's sweet, and gets you ready for some action. The original level 1 is included with the remaster, and it's far longer and more convoluted, and would have really turned gamers off had it been used. By the time I played this level, I was long since used to Dark Forces tricks, but for a first-time player, it would have been hell. Second level introduces the Dark Troopers. They are battle droids created by the Empire for smash and slash raids. They are created by General Ram Mak, a veteran of the Clone Wars with a penchant for up-close and personal combat. Sure, KEWs hurt more, but they're not as cool as an 8-foot-tall battle droid with a blaster. The Dark Troopers play Skrillex for 4 minutes, and the rebel base they are attacking self-destructs to end the pain. Kyle is then charged by Mon Mothma to figure out what happened to the base. And this is another great level. A bit more complex than level 1, but still pretty straightforward. In this level, you find a leftover Dark Trooper cannon. Why would the Dark Trooper just put it down? Did he get tired or something? Next level has you hunting down the creator of the rifle, Moff Rebus. Mr. Rebus has taken refuge in the sewer, and by the Emperor's black bones is this level boring. You gotta pull some switches, and then you find Rebus just chilling in an easy chair. It's very easy to get turned around in this level, and it just seems to go on forever. A fan-made mod for Jedi Academy thankfully gives you a real boss fight, and it's nowhere near as tedious. You first fight a Dark Trooper in the level Mines of Gromus. You do battle with a Dark Trooper Phase 1, which is a Terminator-looking bastard with a sword and shield. You show him that gun beats sword any day, and then blow up the mines. We are now at shit tier level 6. Your mole into the inner workings of the Dark Trooper project is Crix Madine. He was captured, and now you gotta bust him out. Funny enough, Mr. Madine looks like a medieval peasant. Serves the bastard right. Most of the game features Kyle waging a beardless war to take down General Mock's entire Dark Trooper operation. What's really bloody neat is how these D&D nerds made a fully logical plot. General Mock does not make everything in-house on his ship, the Arkhammer. Instead, he contracts out to different organizations and only does final assembly on his ship. You then head to Ramsey's Head Spaceport, and this is a really impressive level and will take some of that bad taste out of your mouth after that shit tier level 6. In this level, you gotta fight some mercs. And one of my fans pointed out in the live stream that the slow Grand pierces the shield. Because yeah, when you fight these Grands, they will sometimes pierce your shield by punching you, and they can kill you fast. Next, you gotta go to the Robro facility, another fine level where you have to dodge some marshmallow fluff, rig the facility to blow, and take down some Phase 2 Dark Troopers. These guys have jetpacks and plasma rifles, and they can be really tough to fight if you get cornered. Next, you head to Nar Shaddaa. This level will appear in pretty much the entire Dark Forces series, and in this first outing, it's pretty fun, if a little confusing. You eventually get captured by Jabba the Hutt Starship. Now, he's not there, though he does show up as a hologram to taunt you. Turns out, he is working for Mock, and this is a great way to mix the original trilogy characters with new video game characters, and it makes sense that Jabba would do this, and does not contradict Return of the Jedi. Jabba's ship would get an entry in the first essential guide to vehicles and vessels. This level is fun to fight through, mostly. First, you gotta beat the crap out of some Kell Dragons. It's cool enough, but it's a bit finicky and has not aged well. The fight through the ship is good too, but the dev who did this level must have gotten dumped by his girlfriend, because he put some mines in some dastardly places, such as under pickups, and he flanks the door you have to go through with 2 bombs that will insta-kill you if you don't start backing away the very second you open the door. Dude, seriously, punishing me won't get her back, man. For the first time ever, you rescue Jan Ors, and you will sadly have to do this in 2 more games. And on the surface, this might make her seem less cool, but she still gives as good as she gets, and is only ever taken down and captured when she is either shot out of the sky or overwhelmed with greater numbers. On this level, you also pick up the Navi card, but it needs to be decrypted. The next level has you flying to Coruscant. Coruscant. I can never get those right. Let's just call it Imperial Center, even though only assholes call it that. This level is mostly good, but the door puzzle really brings the game to a screeching halt. Be sure to look up a walkthrough so you can move on to the good part. Now, the whole reason why you're here and putting yourself through that door dilemma is so you can reprogram a navicard in order to figure out where Jabba's ships were bringing in shipments of resources. After the puzzle, you get to fight Boba Fett for the first time, and while you kick his ass, he survives. You will eventually fight him again as Kyle's apprentice, Jaden Core, in Jedi Academy, but in that game, Boba Fett gets tired of getting dunked on and just says, "Screw this, I'm out." Next level has you hijacking a smuggler ship and then taking it to the Big Mama herself, Darth Vader's #1 pimp hand, the HMS Executor. Oh man, that Executor level is kick-ass, and thankfully a fan during the live stream pointed something out. You are literally on Darth Vader's ship killing his dudes and throwing him the middle finger. Here, you gotta fight a bunch of Phase 2 Dark Troops, hope you saved all that mortar ammo, and then you make it to the Arkhammer itself. Despite this being the last level, it's not too hard and the environmental challenges make sense, and it only took me 2 tries to beat the level. The last minute puzzle is pretty easy, especially when compared to the hell of level 6. You gotta line up a line to progress. And finally, you take on King Bastard himself, Rom Mock. He shows up in a Dark Trooper Phase 3 battlesuit. He does not mock you or make a wah-ha-ha speech. In fact, throughout most of the game, your enemies respect you and say that my boy Kyle is a A1 badass. If you saved on plasma ammo, Mach is an easy enough fight. And finally, after you defeat him, you hitch a ride on a shuttle, and holy shit, that looks like crap. For some reason, I thought this would look like the shuttle from Shadows of the Empire, but nope, this is some peak 90s 3D shite. I'm sure my mind was blown back then, but man, not all old graphics age the same, I guess. You fly off into the sunset and make it back to the Alliance fleet to get a medal from Mon Mothma, and you cement yourself as one of the greatest Star Wars heroes of all time. Despite that level 6 crappiness, I remember loving this game as a kid. I loved Kyle Katarn and thought he was on par with Duke Nukem and Doomguy, and I still remember writing a fanfic where he, Duke, and Doomguy teamed up to fight some villain. Kyle is what a first-person hero should be. He's brash but not arrogant, tough but not humorless. He's cool but not conceited, and it's due to these qualities that he got 3 more games in his series, each better than the last. Dark Forces would sadly fade as other games would supersede it in terms of popularity and quality. In 2010, when I first reviewed the game, the only way to get the game was to find an old disc and run it with DOSBox. Despite its relative obscurity back in those days, there was a source port called Dark XL, but it was never finished. Years later, a fan would create the Jedi engine, and we would finally have a source port that would allow us to play the game to completion. And what a game it was! It blew past everything Doom and the others were doing at the time. It gave us a compelling narrative and gameplay more complex than shoot everything and get to exit. Sure, it flew close enough to the sun that Icarus was going to get major sunburn, but it did not crash and burn. Level 6 notwithstanding. In addition to this modern remaster, we have a mod for Jedi Academy that rebuilds the first 6 levels in the Quake 3 engine, and man, is it good! Sadly, it was never finished, although footage of a beta for the rest of the levels exists, but I could not find a file with the levels themselves. The levels are great interpretations of the original Dark Forces levels and show that all this game needs is a fresh coat of paint to still compete with modern games.
If you played this game back in the 90s and got turned off by the god-awful level 6, I'd say boot it up again, watch a walkthrough, and finish that bloody game, because it is most assuredly worth it. And so, I am General Lotz, wishing you good Dark Forces 2 and good Jedi Knight 2, or whatever makes you happy.
If you enjoyed this video, please consider subscribing, and please consider leaving a like or a comment, as the algorithm desires your soul. And I want to thank all those fans who have supported this channel, both past and present.